Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Hollywood Critics Association Women of the Movement Aftershow. I'm Jeandra Lebeauf, regular contributor to Rolling Out Black Girl Nerds, and I am joined by these wonderful women who've been with us over these past 6 episodes. I will lob it over to Jonita Davis to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Jonita Davis. You can find me everywhere at Jonita L. Davis. You can find my reviews and my Sundance coverage after tonight on the Black Cape mag.com and the Black Cape mag on all platforms. So I'm a critic, I'm a writer, I'm a part-time professor, adjunct. And yeah, just all over the place. Loving this. I've been loving this. I'm so sad to see it end. Not the show, but this right here that we have. So
I like Miss
Yes.
KB.
And I am KB. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter only at the Lady KB. That's TheLadyKayb. I contribute to Complex, Nerdophiles, The Beat, to say the least. And, I have a YouTube channel called Through the Lens of Lady KB. And that's where I post all of my interviews from every single outlet that I work with. So be sure to subscribe. And a new note, the Hollywood Critics Association, I have a new show that just started today. It's called HCA Presents the Festival Circuit. And so we too will have some Sundance coverage on there. We're kicking it off with Sundance 2022, which just started today. So of course, per usual, subscribe to HCA for more.
Awesome. I thank you both for taking this time. This is the finale of our after show. These past 3 weeks is very busy time with Sundance and all the festival times starting to ramp up. But tonight we saw the final 2 episodes, depending on where you are in the universe. It is final 2 episodes of the Women of the Movement limited series on ABC, which chronicles the life of Emmett Till's trial and his mother, Mamie Till Mobley. And these are 2 especially sad episodes as we see the trial run its course and the aftermath of the trial. So we will begin with episode 5 entitled Mothers and Sons, which was directed by the incredible Julie Dash, who took the helm of this episode. And there are some very, very disturbing things that happen, things that are not completely unfamiliar to us as Black people in America, of the legal system, and we see how the trial plays out to decide the guilt or the innocence of the men who killed Emmett Till. So what I would like to start with is just all of the microaggressions and things that are taking place within this trial. They're scattered throughout. Some are not so micro. Beginning with you, KB, what was your overall thoughts on this episode and what stood out to you that transpired throughout this episode?
Yeah, I mean, for me, kind of just watching the final 2 as a whole, anger and sadness, I guess, are the only 2 emotions that I could really say to describe watching it, which is something that obviously was expected. We all know the outcome of the trial. So, to revisit kind of that level of anger that I have every single time that I revisit this story, it was still there. But, I will say there was a lot of sadness because, the goal of this entire series was really to humanize Mamie and her entire family. And something that stood out for me, particularly in 5, because it's the first time we see it, but it happens again in 6, is this entire time we've really chatted about the strength of Mamie and just the strength of Black women, but how her mother's main concern was the fact that she was not grieving her son's death properly. And this is the first time we see her truly break down and actually grieve. And, I think a lot of that comes with the symbolism of the watch. So, him giving her that watch before he left, because he was like, I'm on vacation, I don't need to tell time. And that being really the last thing that she is given from him. And to see that watch kind of break down and the clock stop on that watch, while also knowing for her in the back of her mind that a lack of justice will, prevail. I think the duality of that scene and watching Adrienne Warren, just break down, it was pure sadness. And it, for me, definitely stuck out in the series as a whole because, that's really the first time she's allowed herself to cry and she's weeping. And that she's angry as well, but it's more so that she knows in that moment that things are not going to go, in the way that I think that she still hopes. And so it's so hard because I feel like this entire time, just as a mother, we see that she still has hope. But I think as a Black woman, she doesn't. And I know that that sounds so terrible to say, but I think it's just kind of the reality of that time, right? Like she understands what the judicial system is. She understands what they're going to do. And she knows, I think deep down, just as a Black woman, that they're not going to do what's right, but she's still so hopeful for her son.
Mm-hmm. There are a lot of mentions of time in this episode. Over to you, Jonita. Again, we have the opportunity to see Mamie finally grieve, as KB mentioned. What were your overall thoughts on the episode, and just how time was never on their side? Time was given to her. It was her time to lead a movement. Your thoughts on tonight's episode?
It just seemed to me that it was all, to me, perfect timing because even though we didn't get the outcome that we want eventually, it's the outcome that we needed to kickstart everything, So, time wasn't on their side. I mean, time was not something that they had a lot of, even in the next episode. But time is something that the timing was perfect every step of the way. Even if you look at, I wrote down about in episode 5. The moment that there's a white reporter when he comes into the lounge and he sits down just as the jury is talking about the Klan and what they gotta do. We can't allow this, we can't do that, and doing all the rhetoric, the timing of that, And so it's like everything it's divine timing. I'm just gonna say it, but but it's still sad, and I still hate saying that way because of everything that went down and all the hatred and the tragedy, but it still was divine timing. It still was something that had to happen when it happened, and she was just this force at the right moment. So
when we have our calling, we never know what time that call is going to come. And in this instance, it came, unfortunately, at the expense of her child. But as you meant, it is divine timing. Some of the aggressions, blatant or micro, that just permeated the entire episode, everything from not being able to be served sodas in the courtroom or having the appropriate amount of seats when they've been there the entire duration of the trial. KB, what did any of this surprise you? I mean, we know personally in our own modern lives of what microaggressions from white people look like in the workplace, in the courtroom, in the media. We know what those look like. So did any of these instances surprise you or have you do a different type of self or reflection or affect you in any dramatic way, I guess you could say?
I'll say no. We are used to your point, we're used to microaggressions in almost every facet of our lives when it comes to, corporate America, going to the grocery store, there are so many layers to the microaggressions that we experience. I guess I will say this. The only thing that was surprising to me was that there weren't more. Truly, because, I feel like in that courtroom, so many different microaggressions were happening, but I am truly surprised that there weren't more, or, that those microaggressions didn't turn physical or that they didn't turn into something worse, I guess, is the thing that really surprised me. But just in terms of the level of microaggression that we saw, no. And of course, not having enough seating for the Black reporters, of course. I mean, why would they? Why would they extend that courtesy? They don't want them in that room to hear anything and to be able to record anything. You don't want anyone in that space that quote unquote doesn't belong there, right? And that's kind of the feeling that we got throughout the entire trial and all of the court scenes.
Mm-hmm. And on the flip side, the blatant aggressions from trying to paint Emmett as an adult to to the maybe not even being able to go by her legal name, her married name, that she has to be referred to by her first names where everyone else is Mr. or Mrs. or those. What are your thoughts on that, Jeandra?
I actually wrote about this, about the how the adultification of black kids, especially black boys. This show shows that it's a community effort to protect them, and you see that in the article.
Oh,
Oh no.
I think Janita froze.
She'll be right back with us. I hope she knows she froze. If you are watching, please, if you follow us on Twitter, please check out Janita's piece that she wrote recently. We've been retweeting it, and it's been mentioned, I believe, in the Hollywood Critics Association Twitter. Please read her piece on this very subject about the painting children as adult and preserving the youth, because it still occurs. We still see it in news media. They're trying to do some type of corrective action nowadays, but it's still not enough.
Yeah,
While we
and I
wait
was
for
gonna
others to
say,
come back in.
the over sexualization of
Mhm.
young Black and Brown children as well. Both go kind of hand in hand. So that was the unfortunate part of kind of seeing this in particular, is that they tried to make Emmett seem like he was just, oh, Janita's back. Okay. They tried to make Emmett seem like, he was an adult monster who deserved, quote unquote, what was coming to him for what he did. And I just, y'all, it was just so disgusting. I mean, truly,
Mhm.
that's the only word I can say. Okay, yes, Janita,
Absolutely.
you're
Back
back.
to you, Janita.
Back. Okay, so where did y'all didn't hear any of that, did y'all?
No, the last
Um.
part we got you was when you just mentioned that you had written about this very topic, and so yeah, just please
Oh yeah.
continue.
Okay, thank you. So you can see the link wherever, I linked it to actually the link for the show tonight, so you've probably seen it. But um I talked about the adultification of black boys, and this series shows how it's the community's responsibility to protect the boys, to help the parents. So when you saw even her lawyer, this white man coming to her saying, "Okay, I've been hearing these things. I can't give you this title. We can't do this." And he was so delicate when he was trying to tell her this and talk to her, but he was trying to protect her. As she got on the stand, and actually trying to prepare her too for how they were going to refer to her. Um, it's it's if you've never heard of adultification of black kids, if you never dealt with it, this right here, I think, is the best. It explained it. The court trial explained it better than anybody could, with just the imagery, the language. Every time they refer to him as, anything as this big aggressive monster, every all the words they use and all the imagery they created, it made me cringe. I've got boys, tall boys, big boys, and who are just boys, but people who see them will see these, 6 foot tall, big dudes. But well, my 18-year-old, he shot up, you know at like 16, and but he wasn't a man. He was still, he still has his action figures that he, played around with. Then, he probably don't want me saying that on live streaming, but I will. He still had, his Pokemon cards and stuff like that. He was still a kid, you know, but he's big and his voice had some bass in it. But and so I was just thinking about him this whole time,
Mhm.
and in the article that I wrote about being a teacher and this boy named that I gave the name Mike. I didn't reveal his name, but I just long story short, I heard some teachers saying that, okay, there are some shorter teachers who are afraid of Mike. And I'm like, that was a flag for me, because and so I talk in the article how I did what little things I could, because I felt it was my responsibility, being on that campus, being the only black teacher, not the only black adult in the building, but the only teacher, to make sure this boy, he was 14, a boy, was protected. Dark skinned, very tall, very, husky boy, that these white teachers were afraid of. And I'm like, if you just put your mama voice on and tell him to sit down, and he'll still, I mean, respects you and everything. You're the teacher. But no, they saw him as this big aggressive being coming for them, and they were afraid of what would happen if he got mad. I was like, if he got mad, you're the teacher, use your presence, you're a parent, right? No, and I couldn't get through to them.
Mm-hmm. Part of that protection is reminding them that they are boys and treating them as boys. There's always this argument that, or this depiction of Black boys as aggressive. Well, I mean, it's like when you have a pet, if you treat them aggressively, they're going to act aggressively. That's a very poor analogy, but part of protecting and preserving Black boyhood is reminding them that they are boys and treating them as such. And that's part of the protection as well. The other macro aggression that just truly disgusted me was Carolyn Bryant being permitted to tell this fictitious account of what happened in this store that has taken all these forms, from a whistle to he grabbed me and tried to rape me.
And he was 14.
And the adeptness of his attorney to remind the jury that they came to the house looking for that boy, not that man they're talking about in the court, or man they're talking about in the courtroom, that boy. KB, over to you. Do you think the legal team was effective? Because they are products of this town too, and as the series first started, they were sort of difficult to corral into this trial and to do what they really needed to do to find justice for this family. But ultimately, we see the shift in them taking their legal responsibility more seriously as it pertains to Black people in Mississippi.
That's a hard question, just because throughout the series, when you encounter any of these white people in the series, I'll just be transparent, you're not entirely sure of what their intentions are. And so, we know that obviously this isn't an attorney that Mamie selected. Like, it wasn't like she had her first pick to have him as an attorney. This is who she was given. And she's trying her best to relate to him and tell him the story, but there are often times where it is just not translating. And so even when he gets, beyond the point of I'm just doing my job to caring just a little bit more, there is still in the back of my mind as a viewer, okay, but he's not doing enough. Like, he's not doing everything that he can, because ultimately, and I'm just going to say, I felt like he still felt as if Emmett was a threat. I don't think, I think that, his peers and the people surrounding him in this community really were able to kind of shift his viewpoint in a lot of ways. And so, he's doing the job that he was hired to do, but I still don't think that he saw Emmett as a young boy who was innocent and did nothing, right? I don't think that he ever saw that. And I think that comes across when in his, legal actions and choices that he's making when representing this family in this case. And so, there are oftentimes, people who are outwardly racist and exactly where they stand. And then there are those individuals who are complicit in racism who, just still have not done all that they can do to stop the injustice from happening. And I think he's that type of individual. Like, I think that's kind of, what we're seeing here. He's doing what needs to be done. But in my personal opinion, there was for me, when watching this series as a Black woman, I could not empathize with him or humanize him as the attorney in any capacity. And I'll just be honest, there was no portion of this series where I was like, he's doing the best he can. Like, no, I actually never felt that way. And I could be the only person watching it who felt that way, but I didn't feel like he was truly doing the very best he could. I think he was doing what he could with what he was given. And that still, what was not enough, and it still wasn't the best in order for them to get what, needed to happen, which was justice. But, to Jonita's point, like, even in the midst of this very challenging circumstance, there is something to be said about the timing of it all. And it's really hard for me, honestly, as a Black woman, to just reconcile and say things like, but this needed to happen, because this type of pain I just don't wish on anyone. But I understand how it is the catalyst moving forward for a lot of historical changes to come. And so, that being said, if they would have had an actual attorney who, like really truly was in the fight and really wanted to fight for Emmett, that would have been different. And then where would that have put us from a historical standpoint in terms of, driving a lot of change in the civil rights movement? I don't know. Like, there are so many variables, and we can't 100% say, like what could have happened, because obviously there's so many different choices that we as human beings get to make every single day. So who knows? But yeah, it's just unfortunate. I feel like that he didn't see Emmett in the light of what he was, because even I felt like his line of questioning to Mamie, like, okay, well, how did you know? Like, I felt like he wanted her to, take the stand and express why she knew that that body belonged to Emmett. But I don't think he believed her. Like, there were often times in the questioning that he was asking her that I was like, I think he's just trying to make them, see that you knew it was someone you knew. And, the ring, of course, the ring. But I don't think he actually believed that she knew it was him based off looking. I think maybe the ring was the most believable part for him. Like, I was watching and I was like, okay, he probably believes this is Emmett because of the ring. But when she said, no, I knew based on his feet and his hands and his, like she knew the intricacies of his body, I still think he was kind of like,
yeah. See, I didn't.
Go ahead, Jonita.
I don't totally disagree with you, because I think that he, doing the best that he was given, could have done a better job. But I think that what we had here was this man grappling with the fact that he was seeing a side of his townspeople that he never thought he would see. I think he did believe her, and he did eventually come around to her and to her side. But I don't think he was there in the beginning. I think it's him coming. I think it took him seeing her struggle, seeing the way they were reacting to her, knowing what he knew, because he knew the gossip. He knew exactly what Carolyn Bryant and all that family was about. So he knew that what they were saying was a lie. So hearing all that and everything, I think that he was grappling with, these are my people. These are my, that I know, but this is a Black woman who I'm not, not supposed to be giving on. But she was wronged. I mean, I felt like we saw a man who was struggling with what to do, not, I mean, and I'm not, saying that it excused anything, but I think that that's where we got the, okay, he was doing the best he could and he didn't do much better, because first of all, she was a Black woman. And second of all, I think he was just shocked to seeing how the judge reacted. I mean, I think he did. I don't think he expected that. And then with the ring, the line of questioning, I took it as him trying to fend off whatever questions they were going to have, because they were already coming at her. They were already denying the body. And that word hoax, it was there again, y'all. That word catches me, because I'm like, we didn't heard it for like 4 years through a whole presidency, for different things, the race related. But to see it and hear it back then, I think he was trying to dispel that hoax. So he wanted as many details drawn out of her as he could get. But yeah, I don't think he was even 100% behind her, even at the end, because white man raised in the South, Black woman, we're not equal. We're not on the same path. I'm helping you because I'm your attorney, and because, I mean, these people are doing you wrong, and somebody needs to do something.
You know what? I don't, and see, that's so interesting, because that's where we'll differ. I truly do not think that, as someone who grew up in that town and who knew the gossip about this family and who saw everything that was going on, could truly be shocked by what happened. I don't believe it, because he has seen so much of this happening in the town before, and he knew fundamentally, who these people were. I feel like there's no way he could have actually been shocked.
The denial, though.
Oh, I mean, you can be in denial all you want to, but I don't think denial and shock are the same thing, right? So I think he's still, there's a part of him who still always knew that things would end the way it would. Like,
just the denial, though, it goes beyond just denying it yourself. The brutality and everything, was a lot of it was still done behind closed doors, in barns, in the fields, where it wasn't done in the town square where respectable people are. So they were able to fool themselves into thinking that this stuff did not happen, even though they would go back and participate in it. It's that kind of weird duality of, no, it doesn't happen, and I'm telling you that I know for a fact it doesn't happen, when I'm going to just turn around and go and do it. They have themselves so convinced of this that's how they were able to go through. They were so convinced of, that no, these people can't be this brutal. These their fathers, their sons, they're all these, and yet they have the respectability of stuff you're not supposed to do in polite society and in the town, and in the middle of town and stuff. And I think that denial, that kind of duality, and I've seen it up close, and I've seen it myself, living and being a teenager in Arkansas, predominantly white area. I've seen it where it's like, it's almost like a self-hypnosis. I don't know what it is, but it's like that denial is strong. It's strong. It is.
Well, I'll say some of the stuff was happening behind closed doors. Some was actually still happening out in town squares, though, too. So, and he could not have avoided that. Is my point. Like, there are certain things that you have seen and that of this town that, in my personal opinion, when just watching this series, I was like, there's no way he can truly be shocked. I just think that, to my earlier point, he just chose, not to, you make a choice. You choose to ignore certain things, like, not that you don't believe that they would happen. You just choose to ignore them because maybe you're not doing them, so you don't feel guilty, but you still know that they are occurring.
Exactly. I love this discussion because so much of who he was so rooted in those quote unquote Southern sensibilities, and you can hear it in his closing arguments, and he's still kind of jokey, like they are, like he's almost not taking some aspects of it seriously. And in a sense, it makes me wonder if he thought he was more quote unquote elevated because he wasn't a country guy. He was the big town lawyer and had a different perspective. Maybe he wasn't rubbing elbows with the townspeople as much as the other people, and just uniquely connected to the racism of the town, but definitely benefited and profited from it. And which makes for a great segue into episode 6, which was entitled The Last Word and directed by the fabulous, the amazing Kasi Lemmons, who you might know her from Easy Bayou, from a ton of stuff. If you aren't familiar with Kasi Lemmons, get it together. And that's who directed episode 6. And it opens with Judge Thomas P. Bradley making an address at a full Klan meeting in front of the Confederate flag. That was jarring for me. I didn't expect that episode to start that way. I thought we would just pick it up right from the court proceedings and head into deliberations. But it was very, very powerful to begin that way, with just to let the audience know intimately this town is rooted in racism. No matter what this trial looks like, that she's having her day in court, this is still a highly racist place, and don't you forget it. KB, your reaction to seeing this episode kicking off so strongly with such a powerful image?
I honestly think that it could not have started any other way. I mean, I think that, to Jonita's point just a few minutes ago, in terms of, if you want to show the duality of racism in a small, Southern white town, this is the way to do it, right? You show all the most prestigious and prominent individuals of the town just at a Klans meeting with everyone else in town, and just having casual conversation about the things that need to happen in order to shut all of this down. At the end of the day, we talked about in a couple of the earlier episodes how, she was alienated as the white woman in this, because it's still, at the end of the day, yes, it's still for them a very, like white people over everything society, but really it's a white men over everything society. And you see that in the Klan's meeting as well. So they are absolutely annoyed with these two brothers for bringing this type of attention to their town. This is not something that they needed, nor is it something that they wanted, because at the end of the day, they picked the wrong family. And that's kind of what they're saying in this meeting. Like, we did not expect this to go this far. Why are we still doing this? Why is this still, why are we still having these conversations? Why is this trial even really happening, is what they're saying. Like, this is an open and shut case. Like, we do what we want here. And we're confused about why we are being held to, our feet are being held to the fire, essentially, and why we're even having to answer to the law. So it's an interesting yet powerful imagery, but it is, the truth. I mean, it's a very jarring truth of what, kind of occurred during that time. And in a lot of ways, a jarring truth about, some of the things that are still happening today.
This entire episode was steeped in some very horrific, strong images. Parental advisement. If you're watching the after show and you have younger children who haven't seen it, watch it with them, because a huge part of this was also the reenactment of what happened to Emmett that fateful night. And we'll discuss more in the aftermath of the defendants and them being found innocent. But Jonita, for you, we got to see the reenactment of what happened to young Emmett Till. Too much for TV, not enough for TV. Where do you lie on seeing that type of trauma done to Black bodies on national TV?
I think they gave us a lot less than what we would normally get, but it was a lot for me. And I where I fall on this in this argument, I think that this stuff needs to be seen. I may not be the one that needs to see it. You may not be the one that needs to see it, but there's some folks out there who need to see this, who don't know this story, who don't know the extent of everything that happened. They need to know the brutality, just like the opening scene with the judge right there, and how powerful that scene is with the rally. Somebody needed to see that. They needed to see that Confederate flag right there. No, it's not heritage. He's standing right in front of it. There are white hoods in front of him, and he's talking about eugenics. So any kind of questions you had, any kind of arguments you had about the Confederate flag, they're gone right now. That these images need to be seen, especially right now when we're in an era where they're trying to erase Black history. They need to see the brutality. They need to see what happened, and they need to see that, yes, this is something that we need to be talking about, because, history repeats itself but not just that. Everybody needs to know this story, and they don't. I mean, I've encountered Black people that shocked that who didn't know who Emmett Till was. And I'm like, oh, y'all need to be watching this. Y'all need to be watching this. Well, I can't watch them. You need to know Emmett Till's story. So hands down, if you don't know anybody else, you don't. I mean, if you know Martin Luther King, right? Okay, Emmett Till is the one you need to know. Go next, okay? So I think that, to go back to it, parental advisement, but I think the families should have been sitting down in front of this with the kids. I mean, with the older kids, teenagers, talking.
What I appreciated was the cinematic choice to start the episode in black and white and bring it forward to color, because most of the images that people see of this era are also always in black and white. They make it seem like it was 200 years ago. My mother is 89 years old, and she has seen all this firsthand, lived through it, from Louisiana, small town in Louisiana, and has seen this live and in living color. And for a lot of people who watch this, Black people included, it's such a far off discussion because they've seen it in their school books, maybe a hint of it here. Pictures are always in black and white. They might have seen the images of Emmett Till as a young boy. They've used the images in the series. But they need to realize this wasn't with 60, I was just doing some math, 67 years ago. I'm sure most people have someone in their family right now who is 67 years old or more, whether you're Black, white, Asian, whatever. There's someone who is alive in your family long enough, and you don't think of them in terms of black and white. They're living, thriving people who have lived through this time in our history. Back over to you, KB. We have come to the closing arguments of the trial. Obviously, they've been found innocent of Emmett Till's murder. We've seen the bravery of Black witnesses coming forward. We've seen the cowardice of a hung jury in there, the potential to right this wrong, but just didn't have the courage to do it. Was it when you look at this jury deliberation, it only took 67 minutes to find these people innocent of killing this young man, despite the overwhelming evidence they had. What was your reaction to the aftermath and the images of the two defendants and their wives speaking to the media? Because people, I hope people realize that is real act how their behavior was following the trial in real life. That's how they acted.
You can still find it now. The article and the pictures today, they're on the internet. Yeah.
Okay.
Something that stuck out for me throughout all of the episodes, right, is not only the weaponization of white tears, just throughout this, but also the lack of remorse, the lack of empathy, and honestly, the pride. And I use pride in the sense of, there was pride between these brothers that they did, quote unquote, what needed to be done, right? They were proud of themselves that, they were able to do this. And even when we get a little bit further and we get to the reenactment and the portion of, them just describing what happened and telling nothing but lies, literally nothing but lies the entire time. But beyond that, just hearing him tell the story like, oh yeah, and I did, and I did this and I did that, and this is what needed to be done. It's just that arrogance and a sense of pride that they had that just really stuck out for me. The lack of remorse, the lack of empathy. And so, watching this is very, very hard because, to your point, 67 years to around my parents' age, right? And I can't imagine people like my grandmother, who is about to turn 89, having children after this moment, which she obviously did because my mother was born after this moment, right? My mother was born after this moment, and several of her siblings were born after this moment. And I can't imagine even wanting to have children after this moment. Do you know what I mean? Because there is just that level of fear, and also just the level of protection. She already had kids, overprotectiveness that you now have for the ones that you do have. And my family is from Alabama, so essentially, right next door to Mississippi. So the same things are happening there as well. And so I can't imagine having children beyond this point. And that's a really unfortunate thing to say, to Black and brown people who have experienced these types of, just tragedies in our lives. But I also can understand why people just wouldn't want to, because there's a certain level of fear that comes with having children already, because you want to make them, productive. And Mamie, there's voiceover of Mamie saying this in this episode. There's so many hopes and dreams that you have, when you find out that you're pregnant and you're about to have a baby, and so many things that you want for your child to accomplish. And then they get here and none of that matters because you're just excited to see who they're going to be. And that was really stripped away from her. And I can't imagine, being a Black woman during that time who is also a mother. I can't imagine, what you're thinking as a mom during that time. Like, I truly cannot imagine, because it is so terrifying already to raise children. Heck, to be transparent, I'm terrified of having children right now for some of the exact same reasons, is the fact that, like, these microaggressions, to your point, still exist. Systemic racism still exists. All of these injustices still exist. And, when we walk outside, our experiences are gravely different from our white counterparts. And there's so many things that we have to worry about, and so many things that are looming over our heads constantly, that I just can't imagine, just being a parent during this time and seeing this and seeing those photos and hearing about, when they finally confessed to everything they did, hearing about that, and still just, I would be so distraught in terms of, like, how can I protect my kids even more? And then kind of coming to the reality that there may be nothing additional that you can do. Like, how do you reconcile that? So
yeah. I think about the fact that my grandmother had toddlers, when this was happening, and to hear her talk about raising my dad, who is where I got my ADHD from, so he must have been a handful, and and her other kids at this time. And I think that at this point she was also a nurse's aide, so she was like working as well. we have to remember that this was, I mean, this trial was the exception. What happened was the norm. So they were already used to, they had already, gotten into their child rearing, tool bag, what to tell the kids, how to raise them up in this society, because this is where we live. This is how we are. And, so I can imagine her watching this trial and, and being happy that this actually was able to come out, but actually feeling for Mamie, and then kind of separating that from her every day, because she had to. You have to move forward. And it's the norm. There's so much that happens. My family's from the Arkansas Delta area. She talks about all the stuff that went down there, and she was very, very active in trying to get people to register to vote, and and getting all the civil rights, to getting people to come down there to help with education and everything else. So we look at this moment as happening right, right, like it's the only thing. It's not. It's like every single day. I mean, several times a day, there were Black people being murdered. There were kids being taken, Black children being taken. There were microaggressions happening every couple seconds, and they just had to figure it out. It was their norm. It was their society.
They had to literally push day to day. That's the sad part.
It is,
because even when they found Emmett, they found other bodies too. That's
other
the thing.
Bodies.
He wasn't the sole body, and that's the saddest part.
And no investigation taking place into how these people got there or why. In the midst of this tremendous loss to her family, it gives birth to Mamie as a voice for the movement. It is a spark that starts this international discourse about what is happening down in the South, and so much so that they go on this PR campaign to try to convince people we're not racist. We only a little bit racist. And they enact on this whole PR campaign to try to paint Mississippi in a better light. And I feel like Mississippi still does that. I'm not sorry, Mississippi people, no disrespect, but there have been articles in the media recently where people are still trying to shed that image. But within this campaign, it's absolutely disgusting, the depths. The child is dead, the trial is over, but they're still writing these stories as if he was justified in being killed because maybe he stuck his foot out and someone tripped over his foot, so he's a violent, abusive person. KB, the lengths, your response to the lengths that they went through to just continue to paint this boy as this super villain and kind of rid themselves of their racist notions and ideologies and somehow make it that he deserved what he got.
I mean, in a lot of ways, this is no different from what we see in the media when certain things like this happen, now, in terms of how can we spin the story to make this person of color or this Black person seem like a quote unquote thug, and put them in the light of being the responsible party. So really watching this for me, and obviously I know that this wasn't the origin of, a PR spin per se, but watching it for me, it felt like the early beginnings. Like I definitely can't say this was the first time it happened, but it definitely felt like the early times of, kind of doing a PR spin over taking accountability and responsibility for your actions, which unfortunately is something that we still see happening now in a lot of ways with a lot of different people. And so, in general, we can't grow in life until we take responsibility and accountability for our actions. And that is something that I would like to see more people doing, now. I mean, it was something that I would like to have seen then, but obviously we've moved beyond that and we didn't get that. And so here we are. But I think that there are still lessons to learn from bodies of work and art like this, where we can take the opportunity, particularly, people who are not the oppressor or in the oppressive group, to take an opportunity to learn just how to listen and take responsibility and accountability for their particular actions, that may happen each and every day. And it's also kind of an opportunity to be able to learn. We've talked at length about the microaggressions that are kind of strung throughout this entire series. And, it's so interesting when those happen to us now, kind of the gaslighting that occurs. And it's just like, no, no, no. And, I think that there is a lot of honor in just listening, right? Like,
Yeah.
and just listening
Yeah.
and kind of trying to understand, what someone else is going through and understanding their viewpoint. And, if they tell you it's a microaggression, child, listen, I've been dealing with microaggression since birth. If I tell you it's a microaggression, I can guarantee it's probably a microaggression.
Yeah. Don't come at me with context or what else was going on or none of that, or you're going to get some hostility.
And to Jonita's point, like your grandmother and my grandmother, and maybe this is even true for your mother, but they were so used to preparing their kids for what would work during that time. I feel like my mother prepared me for microaggressions at a very early age, so it's like these things have continued to go on. But
yeah, it doesn't excuse anything, but yeah,
right.
I think that this whole tour reminded me of that the OJ book, If I Did It, and I thought of that and the privilege that just went into the being able to know that you're protected enough that you can go and talk about what you did in great detail and knowing that nothing can happen to you. And and KB said, I think you're right. This was like the start, the beginnings, the grassroots of that marketing, that big marketing machine that I talked about in a couple episodes ago. This trial was the first trial of its kind to really be taken to this level. So they're like, they had to have some way to fight it, and to fight it, they've got this, the gaslighting, the microaggressions, the adultification of the kids. They were making the plan up now. I mean, then they perfected it now. And I think it's up to everybody who is watching this to see those roots, listen to those words, and then think about the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. Compared to, the murder of George Floyd, the way they were talking about him during that, compare those, and then think back to this, the similarities you cannot deny. And so, and you have to say, there's this kind of idea that unless we say the N word with the hard R, then there's no racism. But I think that we're beyond that conversation now. Anybody who's stuck back there, again, just like with the Confederate flag, we're beyond that. And not just with this series. The series did not propel us. I think, there's been a lot of things that happened over the past decade, actually the past several decades, to kind of get us to this point where there's no excuses for you. Even Frozen 2, they had the whole story was about what to do when your ancestors were colonizers and brutalized another civilization. You do the next right thing, so they're teaching the kid. Disney is teaching your kids how to deal with this. You need to be dealing with this, the non-POC, even some of the POC with the anti-blackness, y'all, that happened. Y'all, you need to be looking at this and making these connections and thinking about what's your role going to be moving forward.
Before we wind it up and we talk about the Look magazine article that they did, this was something that did catch me off guard, was the face of what fake allyship looks like. And it came in the midst of that reporter who seemed like he was so committed to telling a true story to the masses, but he was so easily swayed to go write this hit piece on Mamie's husband when he was in the military, and finding out and not thinking, all this time he's been spending time with them and trying to show the racist habits of what happens in Mississippi and how it goes with this trial. Then he goes and he writes his hit piece about Mamie's husband before the second trial for the kidnapping, and in a sense derails their other opportunity to seek justice for Emmett's killing. And I thought that looks like a lot of allyship we see today. We saw a lot of articles and things being written about Black Lives Matter during the beginning of the pandemic, and a lot of that performative action is not happening now that things are somewhat getting back to normal. And that's how the roots begin. When you are a paid gun and you write these hit pieces, know that it's probably wrong, but you do it anyway, all under the guise of journalism, and it's still a curse. So that caught me off guard. Was that something that, kind of, I don't know, that kind of popped
I didn't
out?
trust him anyway. I never trusted him.
100%.
Never trusted him. See, we on the same page. Never trusted him because he was always tried to make himself seem like he was going to do the right thing, but he never did have the backbone to do it. So it's like I never trusted him to actually do what needed to be done to help anybody. Anybody, not even Carolyn, the Bryant, that family. I didn't trust him to help nobody. He was out for himself. And yes, that fake allyship was there. It did break my heart a little bit to know that they brought him in and he still did that, But yeah, I didn't trust him.
I mean, I've kind of talked at length about this over the course of these 3 after shows, but I mean, truthfully, I didn't trust a single non-POC in this. So I mean, like, I just will be honest, like, it was very hard for me to build trust with any of them. And listen, I did not create this show. However, but in my personal experience, just viewing it was really hard for me to trust any of their intentions, quite frankly, because, to your point, both of your points, allyship can be performative and everyone has a price. And that's what you really saw with him, like, okay, truly, what is your price? What are you willing to do? And that's what he was willing to do. He was willing to take that story about Emmett's father, which obviously derailed things even further. And so, I mean, I don't think I could be wrong, but I don't know that the purpose of this particular body of art was for us to trust him. You know what I mean? Like,
no, I don't think
it was, and I don't think it was for us to trust maybe anyone.
I think not even the lawyer.
Us,
yeah,
I think it was for us to humanize Mamie and the Black experience, because for far too often, not just in this country, but all around the world, Black and brown people have been considered less than or even other. And we, are rarely considered to be the fully fleshed out human beings that we are. And I think that was the intent of this body of art. So, I mean, child, kudos to y'all, because I truly didn't trust anyone. I'm so sorry.
I was rooting for him. No, I thought he had some type of integrity, but, we see how
I know. I was like, well,
I was trying to find a glass half full somewhere in the midst of all this sorrow. And
listen, the brown people had integrity. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure.
Integrity,
bravery, willing to uproot themselves, their whole families displaced just for their safety. After testifying to this trial, I want to start the campaign for Glenn Turman to get some type of nomination for his portrayal, because he broke my heart throughout this whole, just the guilt. I could just feel the guilt and just steeping from him. And so kudos to him. His performance was masterful, and I truly enjoyed him this whole series. And so lastly, we are coming up at the top of the hour. So the series concludes with, for one, the Look magazine article where the defendants were paid $4,000 to admit that they killed him. There's no double jeopardy that can apply. And they still lied. With no
brazenly,
danger. They had nothing to fear. They couldn't be tried again. They know no one in their town was going to come up and knock on their door in the middle of the night and pull them out, but they still could not tell the truth. KB, why are these racist people incapable of telling the truth, even without the fear of retribution?
Baby, true sociopaths, clearly. The fact that you can, look this reporter in the eye and still lie. But also, I think, it goes back to that pride that I mentioned, right? Like, they had so much pride telling this story. And I think that, we can often, to Jonita's point, convince ourselves of a multitude of things. And, it really felt like the two of them had convinced themselves that they were heroes and that they were being brave in what they were doing. And I think that that's the story that they wanted to get across. But also, I don't necessarily agree that certain people wouldn't be knocking on their doors. I think that the town was already quite upset with how much media attention that they were getting. And I do think that if they would have been transparent fully in this particular story, that there would have been some townspeople who were angry because it clearly wasn't worth all of the attention that they got, right? And then they would know for a fact it wasn't worth it. So I don't necessarily think that, they would be fully protected. If not, I mean, we also see in the end, they still move, right? Like, they still move away. And I think it's because they know, but I think that they need to put on an air of bravery in that sense. But I am, so glad that, love wins. And after we see that, I am really glad that we got something else to look at for the end of this. And that is, being able to have a proposal and even being able to see, just the young boys talk about Bobo and them talking. He raved about Chicago summers because they're the best. And I was like, Bobo's telling the truth, honey, because Chicago summers are unmatched. So I was like, yes, like, there was, I think, this, like return to Black joy, even in the end.
Yeah.
Jonita, do you feel restored by how they wrapped it up in the end?
Oh yeah. The love, the kids, the joy. I think I just want to speak to the juxtapositioning of the directors and the showrunner who put each episode together, and there were different directors. They each did take the time to give you imagery to show you, the white side, this hatred, and what happens with love with them. Because they were supposed to be in love when they were telling this story, and it seemed forced. It's like, no, they don't even want to be in the same. I didn't think they even liked each other. You can't convince me. But then you get to Adrian and Jean, and it's like, oh, there it is. Even the kids, in the town, they didn't seem as sincere. But then you get, I just love the juxtapositioning. I wanted to say kudos to that. Just having the joy against whatever was going on down there, and just showing that we still kept it. They still found it. Our people still found joy in all of this, while these people could not find satisfaction with themselves ever. I think that speaks volumes. I do.
Well, I salute to Joy. And speaking of joy, it has been a joy to be with the both of you for the course of these 3 episodes of the Aftershow. I am truly honored that I was able to join you and discuss this series. And, just thank you for including me. And I have truly enjoyed dissecting these with the both of you. It was truly a privilege. And I thank you. Thank you for your time.
You. Yeah, thank you so much, Jonita, for even, conceptualizing this idea and really championing for this body of work, particularly because, not only is the showrunner a Black woman, but all of the directors, and it's so important that we get a story like this through the lens of Black women, specifically because we're talking about a Black woman, icon and figure for us. And it's just so wildly important. So thank you for even coming up with this idea and inviting us to come along the ride with you. It has been a pleasure just chatting along both of you and learning so much from each of you, and just really kind of diving deep into this content.
Well, and thank you too for agreeing to come on, y'all. People out there watching, this was last minute. I was able to get things together, and but I'm so glad everything fell into place, and you two were available and willing, because I think this turned out perfectly. And the education that we've been able to put out to people, and the enlightenment, I think that it was needed, and I'm so glad we had this opportunity. And again, divine timing. So yeah, and hopefully we have one more episode in us. We'll let everybody know next week if that's going to happen. a round table of sorts. KB's idea, that one, a round
That's
table breaking
brilliant.
down everything. Yes. So we'll have more information. We're still putting that together, and if it's going to happen, you'll see a notice about it. So
For sure.
mhm.
KB, take us home. Where can everyone keep up and follow you and support you? Before you say that, please, if you are watching from home, please subscribe to everyone's channels and platforms, share their work. Just like the importance of Black voices were during these trials, it continues to be forward. Black people do not occupy the same meat space that our other contemporaries take up in the media landscape. So please support myself, these wonderful, intelligent, gifted women, and just click. It doesn't even cost you anything. KB, take us home.
Yes, you can catch me again at the Lady KB, TheLadyKayb on Twitter and Instagram. Subscribe to Through the Lens of Lady KB. Coming up this week at Sundance, I do have a seat at a round table for an interview with Regina Hall and Sterling K. Brown for Honk for Jesus Save Your Soul, which is like a highly anticipated Sundance film. Super excited about that. And then I already told you about HTA Presents the Festival Circuit. So now I'm going to say, obviously, you just have to subscribe to HTA, but the Peacemaker After Show, the brand new 4th episode of Peacemaker dropped today on HBO Max. And so you can see myself and Tessa and James as we discuss and dive into episode 4 of Peacemaker. So that is also on the HTA channel.
Salute to John Cena.
Mhm.
Jonita.
You can find me on all social media platforms at Jonita L. Davis. You can find my work at the Black Cape Mag on social media and the blackcapemag.com on Medium. That's where all my Sundance work is going to be, the article I talked about, and that's where everything is going to be posted. And I have coming up 2 guests from this show, Women of the Movement, for my bonus episodes of my Creators in COVID podcast. Ooh. So it's a podcast where I had 9 episodes of just talking about what creative people did during the lockdowns and how it changed us, and changed our the way we look at our craft and the way we, kind of look at art. And I was, fortunate enough to get 2 people from this show, Miss Tanya Pinkins, who plays Amma, and Mr. Ray Fisher, who plays Gene, awesome. For a couple of bonus episodes. So that's those awesome. Will be dropping next week. Subscribe to my channel on YouTube, the Black Cape Mag, and you'll get everything. And follow me on social media; you'll see it all. I'm always posting stuff.
For sure. Yes, and of course, please follow me, Jeandra Lebeauf. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, Bad Culture TV. You will find my work at rolling out at Black Girl Nerds, the Illuminerdi. Please follow, and please make sure that you are following the Hollywood Critics Association on all platforms. Amazing shows. I'm quite partial to the ones that these ladies are on. So make sure you are following and subscribing, watching all the content, and follow us on Twitter and all of our platforms. And we thank you for joining us for these past 3 weeks. Again, it was a privilege, and thank you again. And good night.
Good night.